Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from today. I'm Jennifer Vidrine with Child Welfare Information Gateway, the information service of the Children's Bureau. Welcome to Writing with a Sharpie, How to Make Your Pilot Project a Permanent Program webinar. We are going to have a jam-packed presentation today where you'll be hearing from the Foster Forward team about the Works Wonders project. Before we jump in, let's go over just a few housekeeping reminders. You may have noticed already that all attendees today will automatically be muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question, whether it's about technology or about the presentation itself, you can use the Q&A feature in the control panel at the bottom of the screen to ask questions throughout the webinar. We will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the very end where you can ask questions. If you'll be needing to use closed captioning for today's webinar, you can use the show captions button again at the bottom of your screen. We also wanted to let folks know that material from today's presentation will be sent out via email following the webinar. I'm going to turn it over now to Taylor to talk to you more about the Foster Forward team in today's presentation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor, and welcome to Writing with a Sharpie, How to Make Your Pilot Project a Permanent Program. Like I said, my name is Taylor. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a Works Wonders youth leader. I am a Jim Casey Young Fellow, and I'm also a certified nursing assistant. And now I'm going to pass it on to my coworker, Bernadette.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Director of Career Pathways here at Foster Forward. My name is Bernadette. I have about 10 plus years of child welfare experience. My pronouns are she and her. And today I am wearing a pink and brown plaid blazer. I'm a youngish African-American woman with brown hair, vibrant smile. In my role today, alongside my colleague Caitlin, who you will meet in a little while, and Taylor, who you just saw, is to really just discuss our joint funding and sustainability journey with the Works Wonders program, which we'll tell you a little bit about. And to highlight 5 key strategies that can be used by anyone to looking to sustain a program or initiative. My particular role, I was stepped in as the program coordinator for the Works Wonders program at the point where we were transitioning from research project to implementing the program. So I'll be speaking from that lens. But for now, I'll kick it over to my coworker, Caitlin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Diver. I am the Director of Evaluation and Quality Improvement here at Foster Forward. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am wearing a brown turtleneck sweater today with my glasses. I am a middle-aged white woman with reddish brown hair that's increasingly gray. And I am here today to be in conversation with Taylor and Bernadette about sharing our journey and what our key takeaways are. But none of this work would have been possible without these 2 women, Lisa Gillette and Kat Keenan, who really helped bring this research project to Rhode Island and formed this from the beginning. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Gillette. I'm the Executive Director here at Foster Forward, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And if Caitlin is middle-aged, then I'm slightly north of middle-age, wearing my black blazer today and a red top. And like Bernadette, I like to smile and laugh and have green eyes. And I've been with this project since the very beginning. I've been in my role at Foster Forward for 19 and a half years. And was really thrilled to work with Kat back when we applied for and were one of the successful grantees for this research project. She was the architect behind the whole thing, and it's really my pleasure to introduce her. And I'll be manning the Q&A today, so if you have any good questions, drop them in the chat, and we really look forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you, Lisa. My name is Kat Keenan and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am solidly middle-aged white woman with blonde curly hair and glasses and blue eyes, wearing a maroon sweater, though I'm not sure you can really see too much of that anyway. I am currently serving in the capacity as a consultant with Foster Forward to help them continue to innovate the Works Wonders program, as well as bring it to replication sites across the country. As Lisa mentioned, I was one of the original people to write the grant, and then was the first project director to really help develop, install, implement, and evaluate the Works Wonders program. So I'm really excited to see the work continue to grow, and I'm going to be helping Lisa as best I can to answer some questions in the chat as well.
All right, so you've heard us mention Works Wonders a number of times, so you're probably wondering what the heck is that. So we'll give you a little bit of background about the program, because that is what our recommendations and our experience is going to be based off of, that we're going to share with you all today. But just very quickly, in 2011, Foster Forward was awarded a 5-year demonstration grant from the Administration for Children and Families to support the effective implementation of strategies to help youth who are at risk who had aged out of foster care to build relational skills. Through partnerships with federal and state government, higher ed, Rhode Island's Foster Care Youth Board, and local businesses, Foster Forward launched the Works Wonders program.
In the Works Wonders program model, Step 1 starts with enrollment. Step 2 is E2 training. Step 3 is career coaching. Step 4 is experimental learning. And Step 5 is employment, education, and vocational training.
So Works Wonders is a program that supports youth ages 14 to 26 and promotes increased well-being, career development, and employment engagement, relational competencies, and self-determination for youth in and who have aged out of foster care, so that they can achieve success as they transition into adulthood. But through data and in practice, we've learned that the traditional skill-up employment models that plug and play youth into adult systems of work have not helped to address the economic insecurities, the generational poverty, and the scarcity of relational competencies that exist for these vulnerable young people and their families. Works Wonders doesn't simply place young people into jobs. It works with youth to build social competencies that are necessary for positive and productive relationships. And those relationships help participants to pursue their dreams while gaining and maintaining financially empowering employment. So the unique value of this program is that it's co-designed and co-led by youth, similar to Taylor. She's one of our youth leaders, and you met her, and we'll see her throughout this presentation. Additionally, our unique strength is that the Foster Forward team and partners that we work with provide the resources that are necessary to really barrier bust some of the largest and most significant challenges for educational and employment attainment for youth. We just wanted to give you a basic outline of the program. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, we will share links for our website in the chat and later on in the presentation. We'll also be sharing information about how you can contact us if you're interested in learning more.
Okay, so we're just gonna get into a Slido, which is a poll. You can join at the link at slido.com, and the code to get in will be 1609089, or you can take your smartphone and take a picture of the QR code. If you miss it on this one, it'll be on the next page also.
Polling question. What stage in programming and sustainability planning are you in? Results, 23 responses, N equals 23. 0 selected, I need money right now to keep the lights on. 17% selected, I have time to figure this out, but the heat is turning up a bit. 22% selected, I'm at the beginning of this wild ride. 61% selected, I'm here for some general information.
So the question that we have is, what stage in programming and sustainability planning are you in? The options are, I need money right now to keep the lights on. I have time to figure this out, but the heat is turning up a bit. I am at the beginning of this wild ride, and I am here for some general information. So it looks like majority of the people are here for some general information. And that they are at the beginning of this wild ride. So nobody needs money right now to keep the lights on. That's good. I'm ready to go to the next question whenever we're ready.
Polling question. What role do you play in the innovation you are looking to advance? Results, N equals 25. 16% selected nonprofit, 64% selected government, 16% selected community member, 0% selected elected official, 4% selected partner with lived experience.
Okay. And our next question is, what role do you play in the innovation you are looking to advance? We have nonprofit, government, community member, elected official, funder, or partner with lived expertise. So it's looking like mainly government and nonprofit, community members. Okay, mainly government.
All right, we appreciate you all answering those questions for us. That helps us kind of figure out what to maybe spend a little bit more or less time on. So as you know, we're here today to walk you through our journey and how we managed to bridge our work from research project to sustainable program. We've grouped together our lessons learned into 5 key takeaways to share with you all based on what we did and what we wish we did better. The plan is to walk through those key takeaways together, tell some stories to illustrate those points, and then offer up time for you all to ask questions or participate. So before we get into the first key takeaway, I did just want to talk about how much personal leadership matters in 2 really big ways when it comes to sustaining work that you really care about. You all just answered those questions about what your role is in a project. And I realize that for many of us, we may or may not be the person who's calling the shots on funding or policy decisions. We may not even be working within the organization that is doing this work. You may not feel that you have any type of control over whether the work that you care deeply about continues or not. And to that, I would say, please do not underestimate the influence that you can have no matter what your role is. What you do have control over is how you are prepared to influence others. And you're really prepared to influence when you have a clear line of sight for the work, when you intimately understand the successes and challenges and what's needed to sustain, and then when you're able to translate that information to different audiences, to make them aware, to help them care, to help them understand how it applies to their work, their life, their community, and how they can leverage their sphere of influence towards your goal. Now, on the other side of that, once you're prepared to influence, you also have to be ready to jump when opportunity arises. in my experience, folks who work in human services tend to be very thoughtful, cautious, careful people, and that is very important competencies when it comes to the work that we do. But in terms of sustaining meaningful change, sometimes that means flexing a different muscle and having some capacity for healthy risk-taking. At some points, you may have to make decisions without having all of the pieces. Sometimes it's about what is the best next step without having the full picture. So with that, I'll say the strategies that we've used to bridge our program from research project to sustainable project and further into replication really only worked because of the leadership of the folks on this call, as well as the leadership of many others who are not speaking today. So with that, I think we're finally ready to get into it.
Visual representation of Foster Forward funding for Works Wonders program from 2011 to 2022. At the demonstration kickoff, the funding came from the Children's Bureau. By 2013, private, corporate, and foundational dollars were added. In 2015, John H. Chafee funds through DCYF were added, as well as RI Department of Labor and Training, GWB. The demonstration ended in 2016, along with the Children's Bureau funds. The program launched in 2017, and SNAP education and training vouchers and VOCA funds were added. In 2019, replication licensing fees were added, while Chafee funds came to an end. In 2020, WIOA funds were added, followed by HUD and OJJDP in 2021.
What you'll see here is a visual representation of all of the funding sources we've utilized to build and sustain this program with a timeline across the bottom. Please note that it has been a very gradual, progressive process over the course of a decade, and is still something that we actively work on every single day. I wanted to share this visual up front so that as we talk through our journey, you have a little bit of context, especially, in terms of our first key takeaway, which is to start as early as possible, which is good because there wasn't anyone who said that they had feet to their fire, that they needed to find funding tomorrow.
Great point. So we had a real pressing need to scan for additional funding during the research project of the Works Wonders program because we needed more money to be able to pay participants for their internships, their informational interviews, their job shadows, and all of that. We applied for and were awarded a small contract with the Department of Labor and Training in 2014, which was about the third year into our implementation of the research project. That grant was a building block for our relationship with the DLT that has grown over the years. To this day, they're still our largest and most consistent funder of this program. They also served as a bridge for us through providing that support for the direct work in the research project, and then seamlessly allowing us to request to renew those funds for 2 years after, to bridge the work from research into implementation. The strength of that partnership allowed us to begin to start to seek some recognition and apply for and win a few different awards. In October of 2017, Works Wonders received the Rhode Island Foundation and Blue Cross Blue Shield's Best Practice Award for Innovation. And that was, us starting small. It's very similar to investing in stocks in the same sense of like the people that invest early get the largest payout. So you also want to start small with identifying those opportunities to shine some light on the work that you're doing. After we received that first award, in April of 2018, we were awarded the Child Welfare League of America's National Blueprint Champions for Excellent Award. That's a little bit of a tongue twister, right? But we were also very excited for that one. But those two initial awards really prepared us for a more competitive opportunity, which was the Innovations in American Government. And through that opportunity, we were really able to shine a light on the partnership between the state and us as a provider and highlight all of the great work that we were doing. So that's just some examples of how you can like really create opportunities that you and your funders can both benefit from and truly be proud of in your partnership, and start to gain some recognition on the work that you're doing. You're on mute, Caitlin.
Thank you. This first key takeaway may seem really obvious. There are a lot of reasons why when you're in a research phase or a pilot phase, and you already have your budget covered, that this may not feel like a priority for you. But I think the two examples or the couple of examples that Bernadette gave really do illustrate why starting early is so important. One, because it helps you have time to start to build those relationships and establish a track record with partners so that they know that you can be trusted with larger investments in the future. And two, because as she said, early investors get to benefit from the success, right? Any publications that come afterwards, awards that you win, any other opportunities, early adopters get to be part of that.
So now we want to transition into the next key strategy, which is centering the voices of those most impacted and engaging stakeholders. The most compelling argument that you can make as to why your project, program, or initiative needs to be supported on an ongoing basis comes from those who are most impacted by the challenge you're trying to address. It's not enough to just be storytellers. It's really our job to make it real by inviting those who have the experiences to the table to speak for themselves. This has been a practice for Works Wonders from inception. It's been a practice of Foster Forward, and it continues to be embedded in the work that we do today. I'd like to invite Taylor back into the conversation. Taylor, can you tell us a little about how you feel when you're invited to give input about your experience with our programs?
Sure. Usually when I'm asked to give like my feedback or anything like that, for one, I'm always willing to because I love doing that. And two, it makes me feel like I have some power in my role. It makes me feel good and that my needs are being met and somebody's actually really listening to me. It kind of helps us decipher what's working, what's not working, what could be better, what can be improved, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Centering the voices of those most impacted, when you include the community in the identification of the problem, the design, the implementation, the evaluation, and the dissemination of the results, it's really hard to argue against the efficacy of that work. The first phase of our research project revolved around soliciting input from young people. It was collected by other young people. And Taylor just gave an example of how she continues to take a leadership role in the program. I would say, maintaining this level of co-leadership has not been easy. In the transition from research project to program, this is an area that didn't get as much attention as it should have. And I think when you're really trying to maintain operations, often the activities that require you to slow down and be more intentional are the first things that, tend to fall by the wayside a little bit. But it's really more than a value to hold. It is critical to success. And the reason I know that is because the program participants are the ones that told me themselves. So during this time, I did a series of interviews with participants who had a hard time maintaining jobs. And all of the advice that they gave back to me was about how important peer support was to them. So we shared that information back with our funders. We restructured our budgets. We added more involvement for youth leaders in other aspects of the program, such as recruitment and engagement. And our funders responded and were, on board for all of those changes because they knew that it came directly from the young people themselves. So, when you're thinking about how to create buy-in for all types of stakeholders, funders, other stakeholders in the community, starting with centering the perspectives of those who are most impacted by the work that you're doing is going to be the most compelling argument that you can possibly make. And you know, they are the ones, as I was mentioning earlier, that are poised and ready to influence. So with that, we'll show a quick picture of some of our youth leaders over the years and their participation in the program.
And let's get into the next key takeaway: leveraging the relationships you already have.
Okay, so you know, in romantic films, how often there is a reliable best friend character who is usually pretty good looking, but that the main character is always overlooking, and then suddenly turns around one day and realizes that they're the one. So if you take the romance out of that, that's essentially the principle that we're talking about here. Look around you at the relationships that you already have and see if you can think about them in a different light. Pre-existing relationships already have a basis of trust, a shared history, mutual benefit oftentimes, and that's what makes them the perfect partners to step out into a new endeavor with. If you go to the next slide, we have a little quick visual of all the different partners that you could be thinking about in terms of your current relationships. But if you start out by looking at your current funding mix, do you have historical relationships with any foundations that might be interested in this area of work? And if you communicate it to them effectively, what contracts do you hold or close partners of yours that could be structured differently to support this work? How could your board of directors be activated differently around this work?
So I want to talk about two pre-existing relationships that we leaned on pretty heavily to help us sustain the program here. The first is the Rhode Island Foundation, which is the largest state foundation here in Rhode Island, obviously. They had funded work at Foster Forward for years through, you know, multiple facets of services that we were providing. But through that existing relationship, we were able to request support as our program, the Works Wonders program, grew. And so when I started as the program coordinator, I was essentially doing everything from soup to nuts in terms of providing the direct support and case management to our participants, while managing the program itself, helping develop the curriculum, helping with grant writing, and et cetera. But through that relationship with the Rhode Island Foundation, we were able to apply for and receive funds to hire an employment specialist that was able to take on the direct case management role, so that I can shift my attention to managing the program, scaling the program, and working with my colleagues to get to replication. Caitlin mentioned board of directors. Our board of directors has been super supportive and pivotal in the sustainability of this program. And not only because they were invested and committed as board members on the board level, they were also invested and committed as employer partners and funders. Many of our employer partners that started in the research project are still partners of ours now, and that's through our board members being a part of those companies and agencies and making that initial connection. They're also the people that we sort of lean on and take risks with. We ask for feedback. We send our more challenging young people that need more guidance and mentoring. And through those relationships, we have built that trust with those employer partners. Additionally, some of our board members have been part of companies like Bank of America and Textron, and they keep us in the loop about funding opportunities. And many of those opportunities help us to fill the gaps that we otherwise wouldn't have funding for, that allow us to really dig in and barrier bust with the young people, as we mentioned earlier.
All right. Now that you've leveraged all of your current connections, it's time to think outside of the box. So look left, look right. Are there funding sources that relate to an aspect of the work that you're doing that you may be able to use differently? Lisa, our executive director, always says that innovation isn't about creating something new, it's about playing with the parts you already have differently. So this is the place where it is really important to challenge yourself to think differently. Inspect yourself. Are you thinking about the work too narrowly? What are your mental models? What deeply held attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs might be impeding your thinking? And what are the things that you've always done a certain way that could be done differently?
For us, playing with the parts in a different way, what resonates in two different ways, and a few different ways, but two examples that I'll provide. Our organization was receiving and is still receiving HUD funding, but we started in 2018 to provide rapid rehousing to participants of Foster Forward. We looked at the supportive service category and found that it was allowable for us to bill for time spent on employment and educational support that was provided to participants. Many of the rapid rehousing participants were already involved in the Works Wonders and GED prep programs that we provide here at Foster Forward. So we started to be able to draw down some funding for the time participants spent in program and for the time our staff was spending to support those participants. Funding that pays for housing would not have been a starting place for us, but it was a way for us to kind of like diversify and mix up those funding opportunities. Additionally, we were already providing services for young people in the juvenile justice system, both juvenile probation and through our Rhode Island training school. But that opportunity and that work allowed us the opportunity to work jointly with other providers to get some funding to do some more preventative work for the juvenile justice population through the work we were already doing in Works Wonders, and brought some additional money and funding into the program. If we had continued to hold fast to Works Wonders being developed for foster youth only, and didn't pivot and start to think outside of the box, we wouldn't have stretched to the areas of juvenile justice and, in housing unstable participants. But when we look at what we know about involvement in the root causes of the involvement in the child welfare system, they align very closely with the root causes that contribute to juvenile justice and chronically housing unstable young people. And when we assess our organizational values in terms of what we wanted to see with the child welfare system and where we wanted to see them go, we wanted to see a reduction in numbers in the system, which means that serving at-risk youth was an increasing priority for us. It just made sense.
So we wanted to invite you all to get curious, think a little bit differently about where to look for funding. So we're going to use another slide out to generate a list of places that you can look for funding.
So some of the answers that we have is grants.gov, Grant Station, Candid, other organizations' annual reports and funder lists, foundation websites, state websites, state funding lists, local nonprofits, donor database, paid grant prospecting, state and government websites.
Nice. This is a good start on a list. You guys can continue to add to that, and we will send this out with the materials from this presentation so that you can have this brainstorm. But I think we're ready to move on to our last key takeaway, which is about keeping your finger on the pulse. So keeping your finger on the pulse is about understanding what's happening in the world, in your community, and how that's impacting your program, initiative, whatever the project is that you're looking to sustain. So first, let's talk about why it's important to be tuned into what's happening at the practice level. For us, and I'm sure for many others, the pandemic has had a huge impact on our engagement and recruitment process for prospective program participants. We're still working on building some new competencies to replace the fact that we don't have the same kind of foot traffic that we had before the pandemic. Youth are showing up in different places than they used to. And so we shared this challenge with Taylor, and she helped us come up with some ideas of how to do the work differently.
So like I had mentioned earlier, I talk heavily about this program all the time, anywhere I go. And one day me and Caitlin were sitting down and we're just coming up with a couple ideas of how we can get more people coming in and out of the office. And we found out that peer-to-peer recruitment was a good start. And we have rules and incentives that go along with it. And like I said, I kind of was already doing the peer-to-peer recruitment, just being out in the community and talking with other people. We're still in a learning process, so we're still trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what could be better, and what things that we could change about that. And we're still looking into other ideas as well.
Yeah, so part of sustainability is making sure that you're continuing to ensure the quality of the thing that you created. That means inspecting it, asking questions, working with stakeholders like the young people themselves to be curious. The second part of keeping your finger on the pulse is understanding the environmental factors that are impacting your project so that you can be prepared to respond. So the practice that we use to do that is what we call environmental scanning. It's really just, spending time on a regular basis, looking at what the local funding cycles are, reviewing local policy, understanding what governing bodies make decisions for state and federal dollars locally, and understanding what awards exist, what clearinghouses you should be considering, entering your work into. It's really all about knowing what's happening out in the world.
So we talked a little earlier about our relationship with the Department of Labor and Training. And as you can imagine, that experience has changed over the years that we've partnered with them. And we talked a little bit about the challenges of the pandemic, and that also had some effects on our funding, especially as the COVID relief dollars started to flow through our state. We had to pivot and figure out how to frame the work that we were doing in terms that align with their objectives. It only makes sense that the Department of Labor and Training is funding workforce, right? And we know that our population, probably more greatly than many others, were affected by the pandemic. But even as we've returned to some sense of normalcy around here, it's really our job to help our funders understand that despite their changes in priority, our work still aligns with the goals that they have and the objectives that they have through, just like Caitlin said, just speaking the language of the funders and helping them to understand that this work is still something that is a priority. So with that being said, we said a lot, and we wanted to share those key takeaways, but this is the point where we want to hear from you all. Are there some things that, really stood out? We want to highlight some of the common themes that might have come up in the Q&A chat, and really just hear from you all on what questions you have and what things you want to learn more about.
We had a great question that came up in the chat about how are we sustaining our work for the long haul? And I thought maybe you guys could talk a little bit about how we trademarked Works Wonders and what our replication journey and funding has looked like.
Sure, I can talk about the replication piece. So we have 2 replication sites that are doing Works Wonders, taking up the Works Wonders model. One is Monroe Harding in Nashville, Tennessee, and the other is Foster Success in Indiana. And they both have had very different journeys in terms of, finding funding to bring this work to their state. I think, both started out with a flexible funding stream from either a self-funding or foundation, and then have started to layer in some of the funding sources that we've used and utilizing our experience to start to add in SNAP ENT, WIOA, other things, but they have the benefit of being able to hear from us about what we found as the pros and cons and the challenges and what they should account for. So in terms of replication, that has been the process for new sites that are coming on.
But they also pay us, don't they?
Sure, they pay us. Yeah, they pay a nominal amount of money to help support our replication efforts, to do the training, to do the TA, to do the monitoring, all of those types of things. Yeah.
I think it is an intentional strategy for us that over time, we're seeing this as a revenue stream into the organization, just like a for-profit company that dedicates a portion of their budget to research and development. As our learning community around Works Wonders grows nationally, we will be able to use it to fund a portion of our work locally in perpetuity, but also dedicate more resources to the evidence-based practices that Caitlin talked about, the advancement of more research, and the more articles, bringing on more sites. It really will help us advance the work and create a revenue stream, because we do license our manual and our partners are paying for training time, but really helping us to grow the infrastructure that will support what the original grant intended, that we would pilot something, prove it, and then make sure that it gets hardwired into people's practices and expanded and continued to be built upon.
And I do want to quickly just elaborate on the point that Caitlin mentioned in terms of the SNAP employment and training opportunity. Through that, you're able to, reimburse for some of the work that you're already doing and bring unrestricted dollars back in to support the program. So if folks were interested, we could share more about that as well.
And we have another question in here that says, do you have any advice on specific scaling strategies given the many unknowns when trying to piece all parts together?
I have a little bit of perspective on that question. I think this is something that we are definitely grappling with right now, and spending some time thinking about how do you successfully scale. And I would say my advice at this point would be to be very intentional and thoughtful about who you're going to partner with to do that scaling, and making sure that you figured out what your non-negotiables are and that that partner is aligned to those non-negotiables. So for example, when we think about what additional scaling would look like for our program, some of the non-negotiables for us at this point are you have to be a partner who is really grounded in youth empowerment, youth development work, and takes that, as more, as we said in the presentation, not just a value, but really part of your practice. That's a core aspect of what we were looking for. We're also looking, one of our other values that's important is folks who are willing to take a little bit of a risk and try something new, and are willing to go along on that journey. So knowing yourself, knowing what's needed, and having some of those non-negotiables already kind of laid out, I think to me is the first piece of realistically scaling the work that you're looking at. I think certainly other things that you would need to think about is, your evaluation capacity and your capacity to monitor the quality of the scaling, because there's really no point in scaling if you're not ensuring that the same quality exists throughout.
I didn't see this question in the chat, but I bet people are curious to learn a little more about SNAP ENT. And also, we mentioned during the pandemic, there were a lot of federal dollars flowing. That disrupted our SNAP ENT for a while, but generally it's been a pretty reliable funding source for us. Bernadette, did you want to say a little more about it?
Sure. So the SNAP ENT program really supports the work that you're already doing in workforce and education. If a participant is receiving SNAP benefits, you can, as a provider, sort of enroll them in the SNAP ENT for your program. And you are able to be reimbursed for staff time to deliver either coaching or educational instruction, participant reimbursements, which are like if you're providing RIPTICs or I shouldn't say RIPTICs, I should say public transportation access, rides for folks to get to work or to internships, supplies for educational or GED prep programming. All that stuff will be allowable for a 50% reimbursement that comes back into your program as unrestricted funds. So I did put a link in the chat in case folks are interested, so you can learn more about what it takes to be a provider and what the benefits are. I do see a question in the chat too.
I see a couple in the chat.
Yeah.
One, Catherine Heath wanted to know, can we give an example of something that we have brought in from our learning with our replication sites into our own program?
I think the first thing that pops into my brain from this is honestly about the way that we've structured the youth leadership role. The other two replication sites already had youth leaders that they were utilizing for their financial literacy programs. And they had a way of structuring their MOUs that really made sense for us. So we also took that and we have started to basically develop very clear MOUs with the youth leaders that define what they are going to be doing by when and what we are going to be providing to support them. So really like bolstering the structure around the youth leadership piece. They also really highlighted we did a cross-site meeting last summer, and out of those conversations really highlighted the need for further formalization of youth leadership in terms of a codified training guide for the youth leaders and even just a support network between youth leaders. And so that's something that we took out of that meeting and are actioning.
So you have another question here that said, did you have to demonstrate that the program was evidence-based before making it available to others or replicable? If so, how challenging was the evidence-based requirement to your efforts?
So the quick answer is no, we did not have to demonstrate that the program was evidence-based. When we talk about the program, we describe it as evidence informed, because the development of the program was based off of evidence-based programming that came before it, and then it was modified to our needs. And the research project was a formative evaluation. You know, we are looking to do further evaluation of the program and would like something a little bit more rigorous. But oftentimes for something to be called evidence-based requires a randomized control trial. And we know that that is not always the best fit for every type of social service program model. I think, you know, the community guidelines around that are changing a little bit in terms of what is being seen as meaningful evidence, and that it doesn't have to be as narrow as we've maybe thought about in the past. But yeah, it's definitely something, you know, people want to see that you are developing programs and information based on evidence that has come before. So I think that, you know, phrasing it as evidence informed is a powerful selling point for people who want to take up the work. But it wasn't a stopping point for us. It wasn't like we're not going to replicate the program until we've done a randomized control trial and we can say definitively that it's evidence-based. That's kind of, I guess, going back to some of our key takeaways is that sometimes it's about, you know, deciding what's the best next move, not waiting until you have all of the pieces together to keep moving. Other questions?
I don't see any other open questions in the chat or the Q&A or in the chat, but we do have some time. Oh, wait, late breaking. You mentioned aspects of the program that are not negotiable. What parts were, and how do you determine if it's negotiable or not?
Very good question. So we, when we were starting to do a replication, we basically looked at the model in its entirety and looked at what are the aspects of it that make the program function. What are the pieces that we know we need? We know we need youth leadership. We know we need folks to follow the curriculum. We know we need employees who are trained to be career coaches that can guide young people in a developmentally appropriate way, are able to barrier bust, are able to be resilient in that work. We know that we need evaluation capacity to be able to track all of the different elements of the work and make sure that everything is going as planned. Those are kind of the things that we looked at as like, if you don't have this, then it's probably not Works Wonders, right? And I think the pieces that are negotiable are, you know, to some degree how you structure that work. So maybe you know, here Bernadette was mentioning that she was the program coordinator at one point, and that meant that she did everything from beginning to end. And at some point she brought in somebody to take over as, at that time we were calling it an employment specialist. You know, other replication sites have chosen to structure those roles slightly different. It doesn't mean that the way that they perform the work is different. It's just that, you know, in one site they have two program coordinators and they split up the work differently. One, you know, focuses more on the employer partners and the other one focuses more on working with the young people. So that piece can be negotiable in terms of how you structure that work depending on what your site is. But the core elements of Works Wonders, in what makes it special and unique, those are the things that I would say are non-negotiable.
Looks like we have another question. Any suggestions on how to tell a partner or funder that they aren't a good fit, or other activities that make them a better fit?
Well, that's a tough one.
Still trying to figure that one out. I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say very transparently, I think that's something that we're still like trying to perfect, right? We've been very fortunate to have partners that are very similar to our agency in terms of their service array and the way that they engage with young people. So we are at the point of really digging really deep into figuring out what makes the folks the right fit. I will say an important component is the funding and how they're funded. We have had some folks that had like a sort of a fee for service model, and that tends to be a little bit more challenging. So funding is definitely an important factor. But I will open it up to my colleagues. So also,
I just had a little quick story that comes to mind, and it was recently one potential partner is a very large company in Rhode Island who does military contracts, and they are in desperate need of employees, and they did an on-site recruitment opportunity with our young people. And one of their exclusionary factors is they have a zero tolerance policy for drug use. And one of the great things about putting young people at the center of the conversation is that they were like, well, it's legal in our state, right? Like, how do you think you're going to get employees if you're, not a little more tolerant about that? And so I think sometimes being able to, as Bernadette said, be transparent with our funders, with our partners, being able to put young people in the center to lead the work. We're testing historical norms. We're creating new and different spaces for young people. We talked about at the beginning, but this ACF grant really wasn't about workforce. It was an opportunity to help young people build relational competencies. And we just chose to use the world of work as a playground or testing ground for that opportunity for them to achieve well-being. And I think every day that we put them in the center of that work is the day that we get to more honest conversations with funders and partners and other folks about what's really going to be required for us to move forward in the 21st century in the world of work. And we know about quiet quitting, but this is a chance for us to really work together and figure out the new normal.
Any last questions before we wrap up?
Okay. Thank you guys for attending our webinar. If you want to know more information, you can get in contact with Caitlin or Bernadette. Their emails are right here on the screen, or you can scan the QR code and it'll bring you straight to the Foster Forward website as well. Thank you and happy holidays.
And also, we would appreciate if you would take a moment. Jen put a link in the chat to a very short survey to give us input on this presentation so that we can always be improving. So if you could do that, I think it's also going to be emailed out with the materials from the webinar.
Yes, that's right. So I just want to say thank you again to the Children's Bureau, to all of the wonderful staff we spoke today from Foster Forward. And then these materials will be available afterwards. And we will also have a recording of this webinar in the coming weeks posted on caloffer.gov. So thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.